It's a thrill to have you all here today. Thank you for coming. I'm Myron Friedman. I'm the executive director of the Holocaust Museum, St. Louis Kaplan Feldman Holocaust Museum. And it's great to see you here. Has everybody been downstairs to see the exhibit? Yeah. That's fantastic. That exhibit really is kind of near and dear to all of our hearts. We worked on it for about a year, right after I started and working with Dan and with the team to put the design together and to build it. Of course, it was made possible by the 13 prints that were donated to the museum by Michael Steinberg, and we're so grateful for that. And then today we have a special program for you. It's a unique opportunity to gain a deeply personal perspective on one of history's most significant operations, the capture of Adolf Eichman. As many of you know, our current special exhibit downstairs, the artist who captured Eichman, tells the story of Peter Malkin, both as a spy and as an artist who processed his experiences through his creativity. And if you didn't get a chance, we actually have the original journal outside the classroom. You can take a moment to do that with the help of Rob Nelson, our exhibits coordinator. So thank you, Rob. Peter Malkin's role in the capture of Eichmann is one of the most well-known missions in modern intelligence history. And today we're honored to hear from his son, Omer Malchin. Omer is a seasoned brand and marketing strategist with over 30 years of experience spanning tech and consumer industries. As the founder of Moxie Method, he blends creativity with strategic insights to help companies navigate both digital and traditional marketing landscapes. His career includes managing beloved brands like Bailey's Irish Cream. Well, thank you. I hope you brought some samples.
Forgot them.
In the mail. Also conceptualizing, many of you may have heard of this too, Skinny Girl Cocktail.
We can talk about Skinny Girl and later.
All right. Just schnapps in general is okay. As well as leading marketing efforts for tech companies, including the leading website builder Wix, and serving as that Chief Marketing Officer at Netflix. Oh my. You can tell this is a room full of consumers. Omer holds an MBA from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. Wow. Beyond his extensive marketing career, he is also an entrepreneur, having founded startups and guided innovative companies through their branding journeys. He's a co-founding member and a steering committee member of Eichman, a nonprofit organization that bridges Israeli entrepreneurs with Silicon Valley, helping them expand into the U.S. market. Originally from Israel, Omer spent much of his childhood in Europe due to his father's prominent 30-year career as a Mossad agent. Omer also served 4 years in an elite intelligence unit, that would be interesting to hear about, within the Israeli Defense Forces. This legacy of resilience, dedication, and strategic thinking has deeply influenced Omer's perspective on both life and business. But he's now based in the Bay Area, married to Sally. They have 4 children, Nitai, Talia, Yali, and Leo.
Leo is here.
Hi, Leo. You may have to answer some questions, too. So please join me in welcoming Dan Rich, who I know you all know, and Omer Malchin.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's really wonderful to welcome you here at the museum, and certainly to walk through the exhibit with you and hear some of your comments, and even on to the next generation. So we put together a small PowerPoint, which we'll use as the basis for our conversation. There will be time for questions also from you. So it's sort of a little weird because of the angle, but you know these images.
I know, that's
So
okay.
we start with one of you and your father.
Yeah, I heard he was here. I didn't know he was here, but
He was here. He did come here about 30-something years ago.
Yeah.
And people still were talking about how
Wonderful.
powerful that story was.
he was in the museum as well.
It was not at the museum, it was at a local hotel.
Mhm.
But the museum was one of the sponsors, if I recall.
Yes, no, and Eichman.
Right.
We've done it together.
So this is an image of your father with some other very important people, including Ben Gurion.
Yeah, I think this is probably after the capture. My father is the second from the left, a little bit hidden because he just didn't know how to be.
Here,
I'm sorry.
and the people.
If you can't hear,
Can you
wave
hear me?
at me.
So I have my voice is I had a cold, so my voice is so today. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. So this is him. I guess they were getting some awards or whatever recognition of the capture of Eichman. Most of what my father did, for the most of his life at the Mossad was things that no one was talking about. This one was one that people were talking about, but he still probably felt more comfortable to be in the back versus in the front. And Rafi next to him, they were kind of a couple, like Starsky and Hutch, but not so cool. Something like that.
So we'll talk more about the specifics of
Yeah.
the capture, but at this point, it would not have been publicly known, the exact details, correct?
Yeah,
At
for
the
sure.
time of this photograph.
I mean, everybody knew that, Israelis brought Eichmann to trial and all that, but who was there and all that, no one knew for many years. I mean, Israel is a small country, so some people knew just because it was a historic thing, but officially no one knew, including me.
Oh, wow. They care.
Well, we'll again talk more about that. This is your father and some of his Mossad
Yeah.
colleagues.
Yeah, I even recognize some of them. I remember them from growing up. We grew up in Europe. Some of them were our neighbors. Not sure exactly what they're doing there, but it's
So-
him and his buddies.
So we're talking about him, and we've already introduced him as a Mossad agent. But his own son, you, did not know what his exact profession was. Say a little bit more about what if they asked you at school, and what does your daddy do? What would you say?
Travel.
Yeah.
So, lived in Europe until the age of 11 or so. I remember, I knew something is going on. Why do we live in Europe? He's never at home. And when I fill a form and I have to say father's occupation, I write clerk. A clerk that's never at home, in and out. You're 11, you're okay lying, but I knew I'm not saying the truth. But I didn't know exactly what's happening. I also remember often that he used to take me, father and son. We're walking, we lived in Paris, so I remember walking in Paris, and I remember asking him or recognizing that we keep passing by the embassy of Syria again and again and again, and another embassy, not the friendly ones. So, I was a kind of a cover a little
We
bit.
actually have a picture of that.
Yeah.
So I mean, you really are his son, but you're also
I'm also
acting as cover.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm just scrolling with my child.
Yeah.
Don't notice me.
For hours was boring sometimes.
You're a prop.
I was a prop. I was not there for the real action, but I was there for the research. My mom sometimes was asked to come with him for specific things that were happening, and she saw it, and I can tell more about it. I was more of a prop, but I do remember asking him, why is everybody talking Arabic here? Or, why do we keep passing by that same place again and again? Things like that. So I do remember, but you're 8 years old, 9 years old, keep going.
I guess you think everyone has those experiences. Going back, this is your father sort of reenacting, and those of you that were downstairs know the story of the dramatic capture, the way, so many ways it could have gone wrong, but that it finally went right, and it was Peter Malkin who, in his own arms, in his hands, was able to capture Adolf Eichmann. So.
Yeah, that thing, I don't know why he's doing it here, probably for for a movie or for something, but yeah, he was playing the role again, and it looks similar to where it happened, because they were fell into a ditch and all that, so looks like it might even be in Argentina, now that I'm thinking about it.
Ah, when he went back.
When he went back, yeah,
Ah.
after the fact.
So we talked about, your father wasn't quite a typical clerk. You think something's up. So two-part. When did you find out not only was he a spy, but he was responsible for, or involved in the team that brought Eichmann to Jerusalem? When did you find that out? And and what was it like having a spy for a father?
So I was 12 or 13 years old. I remember coming back home. I even remember the kids. We walked back home. I lived in Israel back then. And Anat, I remember her. She told me, hey, your dad captured Eichmann. And I told her, no, he didn't. And she said, yes, he did. No, he didn't. We kind of argued. And then I, went home, and obviously my father was capturing someone else at the same time. So I asked my mother, Ima, Anat told me that Abba called Eichmann. Is it true? She was like, kind of, talk to Abba when he's back tonight. So I waited. And then I asked him, and he didn't deny it. And so it was kind of a double win, because I knew that he captured Eichmann, and I also knew that he's a spy at the same time. Until then, he never told me.
Things fell into place.
Yeah. So yeah, I was 12 or 13 years old. A lot of people knew about it before me. Not so much the kids maybe, but the parents. Israel is a small country. Everybody talks. It was like one of those historic things that the Mossad did that was public. And so people talked about it, but I didn't know until that time.
Well, there seemed to be a time when your father wrote his memoir. Other members of the team also wrote their versions of what happened. Well, had it been declassified, or did word just get out?
Before the memoir came in, you mean?
Did he wrote? It was okay. He wrote. No one.
No. Yeah, when he
wasn't
wrote
a
it.
problem that he wrote.
No. When he wrote it, it was already public. At some point, I don't know exactly when, but in the maybe mid-70s or so, that story came out. And my father at some point left the Mossad, and it was okay to talk about it. And then different people wrote about it and so on. But until then it was non-public information. But Israel is a small country, and people knew about it. He also asked me how it was to be his son. So it's the only father I had. I didn't know anything else. I loved him. I remember a few things about him. Part of it just like him as a person, and part of it him as my father. So one thing I remember, he was always painting. So me as a teenager, even coming back home, whatever, at 2 a.m. or 1 a.m. from friends or something like that, I would see him standing and painting. It was his. No one went to a therapist back then, but it was therapy. You know, he needed like a way out. You know, from from the day to day, and also he couldn't talk about the things that he did, so he talked to the canvas and painted things and wrote things and impressions. So this is why a lot of what you see sometimes in his art is partly capturing history and partly just conveying emotion. You know, and this is why it's kind of a mix. You know, it can be the family and it can be activities and all that. So I remember him as a painter. Also, I remember him singing, but so great. That was not his forte. He was really funny. He was a really funny person. Even in very serious situation, he always, you know, found a way to say something funny. I remember, as an example, and I mentioned that to you today over breakfast. Like, I remember, you know, he was speaking about the capture of Eichman. I was with him. I can't remember where it was. Somewhere. This was when, you know, late in his life, and after the event, there were a lot of people that wanted like him to sign, you know, the book or whatnot, and it was like a line of 50 people. And 30 people in, or half an hour into it, he kind of like whispers to me in Hebrew, I think it was a mistake to capture Eichmann.
He liked the first 30.
Yeah, the first 30, and then it's like, okay, I want to go home. Must speak, exactly. So it was really funny. He was really good. I mean, he saved us. I remember as a kid, often when we locked the car, with the keys inside, when it could still happen, we would just open them immediately. So that was, helpful. He was, you know, really great with his hands, being able to open and unlock whatever it is.
Explosives.
Things that I know and things that I don't know. But I remember cars.
But you said something interesting early on in that answer, that you saw art as his creative, and he saw art as a creative outlet. And during the period of the Argentina journal, it's sort of a cover, because he's doing surveillance and drawing in the guidebook. But he also saw himself, or did he see himself also as a serious artist? That the art also was a value in and of itself.
Yeah.
That he wanted to be taken seriously as an artist.
When he was in the Mossad, he did it as a way for him to relax and all that, and he loved it, sculpting and painting on anything. I remember him, like, you know, it could be inside a little notebook or on a canvas and all that. You know, he always said that his, you know, he always said that his brain is his weapon. He didn't know how to use a gun.
It's interesting.
There were other people in the Mossad that were good with guns. And he also often talked that, you know, his real weapon is the paintbrush. Like, this is what, you know, he always had somewhere. And so he was lucky that he was an artist. He was very creative, but for the first 30 years he did it only as, you know, on the side as while he was in the Mossad. And then but he was also a real, you know, so it was his cover as a Mossad agent.
But it was real.
But he was real too. He didn't just do it, you know, as a cover.
He wasn't doing stick figures.
No, yeah. He really liked it.
So, I think the next couple of images are family images. So before we get to them, we're talking about your father as a Mossad agent. I know certainly I think immediately of Eichman. Could you maybe talk about some of his other, incidents and Mossad actions that he was involved with?
Yeah.
Maybe one or two?
Yeah. So I don't know about many. I do know, I'll maybe mention a couple.
Definitely if you do the 72, that.
Yeah, I'll mention that. So the one that I know and that became kind of publicly known that he was part of it was after the murder of the Israeli athlete in the Munich Olympics in 1972. Israel kind of went after the Black September leaders. The main one was a person called Mahmoud Ashmari, and he lived in Paris. And by the way, I know from my father that one of those pictures where he took me and friends to do research was before that. I was like I think 9 or 10 years old, and so this was at the time pre-technology like today. They basically went into his apartment in Paris, put an explosive connected to his phone, and then waited for the guy to be at home without his family. So Israelis always cared about not killing innocent people. So his wife and his baby were out of the home, and they called him. And when he responded, and they realized that it's him, the phone exploded, and he lives.
That seems to ring a more recent,
yeah,
more recent bell.
yeah.
Is this the current ideation, version of that
I think so.
using technology?
Yeah, the beepers in Lebanon a few months ago are in a way, and there was also the Mossad, are in a way the...
That was the Mossad.
But no one said.
Israel kind of...
They took responsibility for
Yeah, they took responsibility for it. And it was in a way it was the 2000, the 2025 version of what happened 50 years ago there. I remember my father, it reminds me now, Yaakov Rechavi, a friend of my father, he was the tech guy that worked closely with my father. And anytime my father went for an operation, he said, I need this and this. And the guy invented it, for the operation.
Yeah.
And,
like the James Bond character.
Yeah, he was really
go
like,
through the different
yeah.
exploding cars and.
Yeah. So that was one. There was Israel Ber, who was a spy, a Russian spy in the Israeli military that my father also caught. There was Nazi operators in Egypt after the World War that were working on missiles to hit Israel, and he was responsible for eliminating that problem. But I also remember, maybe most of what I remember was mostly anecdotal versus like stories. Maybe one example I can give, and this is one I remember not from my father, but when my father passed away during the Shiva, a lot of father's friends who worked with him told me stories. So that's one of them that I remember. I think it was in Frankfurt. My father went with his team into an apartment of someone, I don't know, non-pro-Israel, and they needed to just get some. They wanted to collect a lot of like the paperwork and information. So they went in. The guy was not there. They knew he's not there. And then suddenly they started hearing a baby crying inside the apartment. Basically, the family left the baby alone in the apartment. No one knew. The baby started crying and crying and crying louder and louder. And at some point, the neighbors heard the baby crying and they called the police. So my father asked the team to just leave the place. He stayed for another few, 2-3 minutes. He was hoping to get more information, and then he heard the police arriving. He left the apartment, waited in the lobby. It really bugged him that he couldn't finish the operation. So he waited for the police, and he told them, you know, there's a baby crying, as if he's a neighbor. There's a baby crying on the third floor, so, and he went with them, and they couldn't open the door, so he opened the door for them. And they were busy with the baby, and he finished the mission. Very typical of my
And
father.
that's something you heard from a colleague.
From a colleague.
That's you. Just cover again. You at your wedding?
Yeah, this is me at my wedding. My father in the background. I was a baby.
So he
No.
did he ever think that you might go into the family business?
He was hoping I will not go into the business. Yeah, and you know, I was at some point after, I can't remember if it was before college or after college. I got a call from I can't remember who it was, but something Secret Service. They kind of recruit, and they asked me if I want to, come for an interview or whatnot. And I remember telling him, obviously I had to tell him about it, and he didn't tell me you cannot, but he was really, motivating me to explore life differently. Yeah.
And yet they did approach you. Like maybe they thought it was like hereditary. You didn't have those same skills. Except, would you say you inherited some skills, some characteristics?
I
should probably ask your son.
Yeah, you should ask him maybe. But I think we're both we both have a creative soul. Maybe I just decided to do it in a very boring way, regular work. But a lot of what he did was, being very, very creative and out of the box. I always say out of the box thinker, but like I don't think he had a box. There was just no box. He always did things in the opposite way. And in my own, life, I try to think in a creative way, but I'm just a brand person. And one more thing, just you asked me if I was interested in joining. The other thing that happened when we lived in Belgium, I had two good friends in class. I went to I think it was a Jewish local Jewish school, and there were a few Israelis. Two of them, Ido and Iki, were my friends. And within 6 months, Iki's dad was shot by an Arab in a coffee shop in, say, Paris, and Ido's killed. And Ido's dad was shot in Barcelona. And so I remember that this kind of like stayed in my memory as like, I don't know that I want to do something like that. Not because of, to me, I wanted to also be able to be a father and have kids that will be with me. I love my father, but he was, for most of the time, he was away. And I wanted to do it a little bit differently. So, this is my sister, Ami, in her wedding.
Very nice. He must have been very proud to see his children.
Yeah.
Does she live in Israel?
She lives in Israel now, yeah.
Beautiful lady.
I agree.
Your father and mother?
Yeah, these are my parents. This is during I think this was during one of their wedding anniversaries. We did a surprise party for them.
Is that the same as this?
Yeah, it's the
Okay, so
same.
Omer suggested this photograph, and I said, I don't know that we need to include it. It's a little, like, what's going on there? And you said, no, put it in, because this will trigger me to say some things about my family. So when you see this image, and whatever it is you're doing to celebrate your parents' anniversary, what would you say about your family based on this image?
You have to ask
But was it that you were sort of fun-loving and
yeah, I was,
unexpected, maybe?
so I mean, maybe that's another little DNA that I have from my father, always trying to do something, I don't know, you can call it stupid or funny, or both. So this was one, I remember, you know, we had like a bunch of people at home, we surprised them. First, I felt good that I surprised him because I was able to surprise a spy. That already felt pretty good.
Where did you live in Israel?
I'm sorry?
Were you living in Israel?
In Tel Aviv, yeah. We lived in a neighborhood in Tel Aviv where a lot of the, somehow, I don't know, Israel at the time was a small country. A lot of the people that worked in the Mossad lived in the same neighborhood. So we were like neighbors to each other. And then I think that I was trying to make sure that that I wanted people to, you know, congratulate my parents during this party, and no one was listening to me, and so I just decided to do a 360, and that helped.
And you got the attention that you. Okay.
And,
So we saw your wedding, your sister's wedding, and a joyous anniversary. It seems though, from your father's childhood and his immediate family, there seemed to be sort of a darker cloud, whether it was surviving the Holocaust, not knowing what had happened to your father's sister Fruma and her family till knowing it was bad, not knowing the details. Your parents adjusting to a new country, mandatory Palestine, which was not an easy transition. And how did your father deal with, again, that darker side? And you know, they say that trauma gets passed on. So much in the exhibit seems to be seen through your father's memory. So what did how did he deal with that? What do you feel maybe got passed on to the next generation? And was the Holocaust something discussed in the family? Say a little bit about that. Again, a slightly darker side.
Yeah. So I think I remember my father always saying that his sister and her kids were basically didn't make it, didn't survive, were killed, plus many other family members. They moved to Israel. I remember that he always said that trying to grasp the story of like 6 million people that were killed in the Holocaust was too big of a story for him to deal with, and even the personal stories within the family. The parents didn't talk much about it, his parents, and he didn't talk much about it with them, but he didn't want to know more about it. He was just looking more into the individual stories versus the stats and the big story. And I remember the same thing. I remember he sometimes told me about his sister and all that, but not in a way that felt traumatic or anything like that. It just felt more like an emotional family story. Part of why he was interested when he was chosen to go and capture Eichman, to him it was a little bit of a closing the circle, and he really wanted to do it. And this was and he was already 30 plus. I think it was maybe the first time where he really wanted to proactively ask questions about what happened to the family and all that. But he didn't want to do it with his mother, and so he disguised himself as an American tourist, and he went to his mother's apartment in Haifa and knocked on the door and said that he's here to rent the place. She didn't look for renting it, but anyway, she let him in, and immediately, like a good Jewish mom, started preparing food for him, and went to the kitchen to prepare food, and he then spent the time looking at the pictures on the wall of his sister, starting to read things and all that, and as this American tourist, and she didn't realize that it's him, started asking her about the story of his family and his sister and all that. And at some point he told her, it's Tzvika. And she was angry.
He says that in his memoir, that that was the test of his ability to disguise himself.
Yeah.
That he did fool his own mother, who was willing to open up psychologically more to a stranger than she
Yes.
would with him.
Yes.
And he says he pulled it off.
Yes. And he also never told her that he captured Eichman until she was very close to die in the hospital. And he came to the hospital, and she was kind of unconscious, and he told her, Ima, was holding her hand, and he kept telling her, at some point he told her, because he knew that it'll be something that she will feel, proud, and he told her, I captured Adolf Eichmann. He said it a few times, and she opened her eyes and looked at him, didn't say much, but looked at him for I don't know what, 20 seconds, closed her eyes. And
He also said Fruma is avenged.
True.
So that his sister's murder was also...
Yes. He also, this book with the painting, after he captured Eichmann, he went to Haifa. We lived in Tel Aviv, she lived in Haifa, and he put it in her closet, and it was there for 17 years. We didn't even know about it. She didn't know about it. It's just one more book until she passed away.
And then he took it.
And then he took it. So.
You think he I'm just putting this with the books, do you think there was a psychological, I'm packing this away, or do you think, was that an intentional, and then retrieving it as a memory, or am I putting too much, intent behind it?
No, I don't know, but it was, he couldn't talk about it, so it was probably safer to be in a closet somewhere.
It includes pictures of Eichmann. Right?
Exactly,
Right.
it includes a picture of Eichmann, it includes what Eichmann told him, what he told Eichmann and all that. So I think it was probably safer to put it there versus like where we were kids and all that, somebody finding a book. What's going on here?
Right.
And I think he probably, I don't want to say forgot about it, but it was just there. Even when he brought it to our house, I didn't know about it until even a few years later.
What the significance of
Yeah.
it. In his memoir, he talks a lot about the fact that over those days, especially at night, he's having conversations with Eichmann. And it's sort of like what you said earlier about wanting to understand or grasp something about the monumental quality of the Holocaust, that he says he wants to try to understand how this human being could do, these evil things. Did he ever talk to you about those conversations?
Yeah. Later on, when
When it was out.
when it was out and I was an adult, and there were movies and all that, Yeah, he told me a lot about that, and I think that stayed with him for many years, because he was, there were a few team members, but and it wasn't even that he was supposed to be the one that was to be with him for most of the time, for those 10 days, but he ended up being the one that was spending most of the time with Eichman, talking to him and trying to understand, his mind, and how did it happen, and why did he do it, and how did he feel, and I remember little things like, he was talking to Eichman about Eichman's son. He had a kid, and when he started talking to him, Eichman suddenly was worried that something happened to his son, and he asked him, "Wait, did you guys do something to him?" He said, "Of course, we didn't do anything to him. But why are you so concerned about your son, and you had no problem killing Fuma, my sister's kids?" And his response was, "Oh, but they were Jews." And a lot of these things just, even when they talked, he still was, in a way, justifying it. The same way that when they were preparing him to, leave the house.
In disguise.
Yeah, and they brought him, they wanted him to sign the papers and all that. And they brought him, they made him like an El Al flight attendant or pilot.
To get him on the plane, to go
get
to
him on the plane.
Jerusalem.
And so I remember my father telling me that it was like suddenly he shined. He felt so good because first uniform again. Yeah, he was able to wear a uniform, and then they gave him the hat, the pilot hat, as a Star of David. He was taking the hat and he was cleaning the Star of David, so that it looks perfect. Just very
Lots of
German.
contradictions.
Yeah, and so these things I remember talking to my father quite a lot.
Mm.
And I remember my father said he was trying to paint, he was painting him, and he said, with all of that, he still feels just like a regular person. I do not know how to paint an evil person. I paint him and he doesn't look evil. He looks like a person.
It's actually one of his most realistic.
Yeah.
Not a lot of color, just
Yeah.
sort of a
Exactly.
drawing,
Yeah.
capturing the representation.
Yeah.
Let's see what we have. Some more happy occasions.
Yeah. My uncle, my sister. Yeah.
Grandchildren.
Grandchildren. Yeah.
Three of yours.
Yeah. Everybody except Leo is here. He was
So we had to bring Leo here,
Yeah.
so we see all four. But they say what better revenge for the Holocaust than children and grandchildren.
Yeah.
If the idea was to wipe out,
Yeah.
so he must have been very proud of
Yeah.
you and the next generation.
I hope so.
So I like this image because it captures him and the importance of art. Obviously, we talked earlier about the role that art played, and that continues till the end of his life, correct?
Yeah. This is how I remember him. Painting. Like I said, always like that. When he was at home, it meant that he could take a break and relax and do that. He was very much of he was either in super deep focus, especially if it was work, or sometimes, a little bit like absent-minded, like very, letting things just happen. And painting was maybe in the middle, because painting he was focused, but it gave him a break. But I do remember a lot of times where, there were things where he would go from being super, I don't know if we have time, I can tell a quick story. I remember him, for example, we were in New York. We went to Citibank he needed to deposit $3,000 or so. With a Samsonite, we went to the bank somehow together. We're sitting, and he was just like, I always remember there used to be a show called Colombo. Yeah, he was more like a Colombo, like, like no one, he was not like Roger Moore or Sean Connery. He was more like a Colombo. And I remember him like, kind of like, sitting there, Samsonite next to him, I was sitting next to him, we were waiting for someone to take the money and deposit it, I don't know. And then I see the person taking the Samsonite, looking like a bank employee, but going out towards the street with the money. My father, no idea, nothing, like, and I tell, Abba, I think someone just took the money. And he's like,
They're not going in the right direction.
yeah, and he was like, he's like, wait, where's the money, where's the money? Not like, not in an operate. And then I saw him switching from, the absent-minded to super deep focus. So I had like little, examples of him, like I could see him, and I remember him standing and just telling me 2 words, follow me. And we're running into the street, 42nd Street in Manhattan, 11 a.m., hundreds of people, and I run after him, and we walk, and he looks to the right, and he looks to the left, you can't see anything. And then I remember him like suddenly going into the ground, I don't know what he's doing, going into the ground, and he basically was looking for the base of the Samsonite, because it's much easier to see something instead of a lot of faces, but not everybody is holding a bag, or a suitcase. And he saw the back of the suitcase, and then that was the second time he said, "Follow me." And we started running, and we ran for like a block or a block and a half, and then we arrived to the guy. I remember he punched him, took the suitcase, and then we went back casually into the bank. So I have stories like that.
I have another one also.
Yeah. This is me and my friend Ron and Uri, who's who's a writer and
There's another.
yeah, they're good friends and like again childhood friends, Ron and Mimi, and
But
they're
he
always
wrote
together.
about him. He wrote about your
Yeah,
father.
he wrote about my father, and he was also, if my father was not painting, I remember a lot of time coming at night, and they would just, sit in the kitchen and talk till 4 a.m. and, talk and talk and talk. So I remember him and others.
So his writing was one of many people that wrote about your father that I wouldn't say creates a legend about your father, but talked about what he had done and what he had accomplished and how incredible that actually was. And then there are a series of films about your father. This is your father and Chaim Topol, who probably best known for playing Tevye in Norman Jewison's Fiddler on the Roof. But he was also a close friend of your father's. Do you want to say a little about that?
So Chaim and my father were...
And played him in House on Garibaldi Street.
Yes, coincidentally. Honestly, coincidentally. So Chaim and my father were really good friends, and the families were really good friends. I'm Omer, my sister is Adi. They had an Omer and Adi too. And they were friends. I think the reason they were friends, I think is because they were both artists. One was an artist and a spy, the other one was an artist and an actor. But they came from the same place. And they bonded, they really liked each other. Also Chaim, being with Fiddler on the Roof in England for many years and all that. There are stories that my father kind of recruited Chaim to help him with different things, whether it's connections or just...
Sort of with the Mossad connection.
Mossad connections, yeah. Chaim passed away a couple of years ago, and there were things going on. And also they were both painting. I remember they were painting each other often. And they really liked each other. And I have another story about them.
That's the story.
Yeah,
Tell
that's the
that
one.
story.
Yes, I remember also they were in New York together, and they went to a restaurant. They left the restaurant, and waiting for a taxi, yellow cab, and two guys approached them with a knife to mug them, to rob them, and the guy came to my father with a knife and put it, I can't remember, face or here, and said like, you know, your life, money or your life. And my father said, okay, no problem. Went to give him the money, but instead of money, he punched him again. I have only two stories with
Didn't know what they
punching.
were dealing with.
Yeah. He punched him. The guy went all the way back into the window of the store, broke the window, fell into the store somewhere in Midtown, and didn't move much after that. The other guy, there were two guys. The other guy ran away, and then Chaim, actor, my father, kind of an actor. They you know, so they looked for a second. Then my father told Chaim, you know, after me. Went into a cab. No, ran for two blocks. Went into a cab, and then again, this is where my father switched from just a regular guy to the spy. And this story I know from Chaim. And then he basically, Chaim, the guy, he told the taxi, I don't know, go to this and this hotel, I can't remember, Waldorf Astoria. Went into the hotel, from front door, left through the exit, took another cab to another hotel, front to exit, and then took another cab, and then drove back to their hotel. He was like playing with it, whatever, just to make sure they asked the taxi driver to pass by the place where the robbery happened. A lot of police and ambulances and all that, and they said, okay, check, we can go to bed and be done with it.
Being taken care of.
Taken care of, yeah. So, a lot of stories like that.
Chaim Topol told you that story.
Yeah, yeah.
Sounds not atypical.
Yeah, exactly.
So he played, again, Topol played the role of Malkin in House on Garibaldi Street, which was in the 76, I want to say.
Yeah.
And then we see him here with Robert Duvall. Duvall played Eichman in The Man Who Captured Eichman in the 90s.
Yeah.
In the 90s.
Yes.
How did, you told that story about the first 30 people, that was great, but the line was too long for signing autographs. How did he feel about when people are making movies about him and significant actors are playing him, both then and Operation Finale more recently, telling the same story.
Yeah, Ben Kingsley was Eichman then.
Ben Kingsley.
Oscar Isaac was my father.
Oscar Isaac, he would have liked a matinee idol
Yeah, yeah.
portraying him.
Yeah.
But how did he feel about, crossing over into sort of popular culture and that story being told and focus on him?
Yeah. He was a storyteller, so I think he was okay with it. And by that point, it was after 30 years of not being able to talk to anyone about anything. And then, at some point he was able to be a bit more, social, tell the story and all that. I mean, like here and there he got tired sometimes, and, went dark, but overall I think he was fine with it. I think back then also, he had kids, family. I think it was a way for him, they told the story of him instead of him telling the story of him. So I think it was, he felt good about that, and in a way it was a way for the family to know about him as well.
That's our last image of the
Yeah.
memorial at the time that he passed away.
Mm-hmm.
Still with art in the background.
Yeah,
Still
all
with
his
his paintings.
paintings.
Let's open it up to some questions. And how do you want to do this? Should I just call on people? Is there a microphone? You have loud voices. Go ahead.
It takes a lot of guts, almost people, to be in that kind of a business. How did you get involved in it, and where did the character come from? Second thing, Aviv did you live? Maybe we're neighbors. Find out who it was.
Small country.
But one last thing. Any significance? Your father spelled his last name with a K.
Yeah.
You spell it with a CH. Any significance of that?
Okay. So he spelled it with a K because when he wrote the book, someone in the publishers told him, it'll be much easier for Americans to say Malkin versus Malchin or Malchin and all that. He had many passports, but in his real passport it was still CH. Sometimes he would forget what his name is. I remember one time, I remember a story where he was I can't remember where, in a country, and police arrested him for nothing serious. I think it was like for driving or whatever it is.
Israeli style.
And they asked him for his ID, and so he gave his ID, and then the police man asked him, "So what's your name?" And he didn't remember. He had different names in different operations. So he grabbed a passport from the policeman. He said, like, "Can't you read?" And then he chose to read the name. Okay, sorry, diverting you. But so that's the Malkin reason. We lived in Afeka, which is close to Ramat Aviv, north of Tel Aviv. And what was
Where's the character come from? I mean, it takes a lot of guts.
Yeah, so he was recruited to the Haganah when he was still a teenager, and then he learned Krav Maga and different things, and he was just recruited at the time. The Shin Bet and the Mossad, which is like similar to FBI and CIA, were one place. They just recruited him when he was, I think, 19 or so, and he was, by then he did he learned how to be open locks and all that, and this is how it started. So kind of just serendipity.
And he says in his memoir that he's not really fitting into the typical school, etc. He likes the idea of disguise. And when they asked him why he initially joined, he said he liked adventure.
Yes.
So there's a spirit of adventure that he seems to have. David.
Was he involved at all in the movie Judgment at Nuremberg?
Not that I know.
Because that was all about the trial.
Yes, but the movie itself, I'm not sure he was involved in.
Where do you live now?
I live in the Bay Area, in California. Yeah.
By the way, thank you very much.
No, I'm happy.
How many languages could he speak, and where was his family from? What country and family?
If you ask him, he'll say that he speaks many languages. A lot of them are so-so. But he was able to speak Hebrew, obviously, English, Yiddish, German, not great. Could probably say a few words in Polish, where his family is from. His family came from a town called Jilkivke. Although even then, sometimes he'll say he was born in Poland, sometimes he'll say he was born in Israel. Within the same day,
He
say
said both at different times.
Said both, also different years. He has different ages, he was able to speak a little bit of Arabic, mainly curse, but speak.
It's a significant question because people said, well, how was he able to communicate with Eichman? Did they speak the same? But apparently, he spoke enough.
Yeah, he spoke. He
That
said
they
they were
could
able to speak
communicate.
German.
To tell the police that there's a baby crying.
Yeah.
I have a question about your mother. Sort of when does she come into his life, and what does she think he does for a living?
It's funny. I came from Israel 2 days ago, and I asked her about that. So they got married after the Eichman thing, about maybe a year and a half after. But they were both from Haifa, and it's she just told me last week that she remembers she was in the street in Carmel in Haifa, and suddenly there was a buzz in the street that Eichman was captured and brought to justice in Israel. She said, like, I mean, there was no internet or anything, but she said, like, everybody suddenly in the street was starting to, it's kind of like a 9/11 thing, you know, everybody talks about it. Everybody was talking about it. And she knew of him. And so they kind of like, she suspected that maybe he's involved, but they didn't know each other well enough. Once they got married and all that, she knew of that, you know, back then. So he told her, you know, back then.
So she knew he was part of Mossad and Shin Bet.
Yeah, she knew, and he was also often bringing her with him to different things, and you know, we lived in Europe because of that. So yeah.
So we said earlier she was sort of the stable
Yes.
while he was off and running around.
Yeah.
There was a question over there.
Yes, I'm back to this group.
Oh, your father came to Palestine when he was how old?
That's a good question. It depends. But yeah, he was a few years old.
Okay.
He
so,
was a young, very young.
and my curiosity is about your aunt was Froma? Or what was
Froma.
it? Yes. So she's back in Poland?
They stayed there and they didn't make it, you know, through the Holocaust, through the war.
They
So-
couldn't get papers,
Okay.
so they were stranded.
Okay. So your father and his parents, did they know what was going on with Froma? Was there any communication? What were they going through?
Yeah, so you know, it's a bit vague with my father because this is where he never said it in a very clear way, but yeah, they went back and forth. You know, even after they were in Israel, they went back. So the parents were still in touch. I think going back to Poland because she was there, but and then they knew that, you know, Fuma, his sister, and the kids were killed, but they were in Israel. Yeah. And many other family members too. There's someone there.
You mentioned Shimon Hassan. Was he originally part of that and then changed over to Mossad?
Who?
Shin Bet.
Yeah.
Was it originally an Eichman under Shin Bet capture or Mossad? And when did he switch?
No, that was already Mossad, but when my father joined the Shin Bet, it was one entity. At some point it split. My father went to the Mossad, but it was just one thing in the beginning for the first X number of years of Israel.
Couple more questions? Any more questions? I have a question.
Oh. You're from the back.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but I'm curious what Leo thinks of all of this. And if he doesn't want to share, that's okay. But if he has any thoughts or feelings about them.
Yeah. So I was too young to really remember him. My older siblings probably have a better conception of him, but I've heard all the stories that my dad just said a million times. So, I mean, as I get older, I start to realize that it's the significance of it, but I guess I just grew up thinking it was normal.
How old are you?
21.
Done with the army.
So my question is, was there any threatening repercussion from his activity in Buenos Aires? Was there a fear following him after that, or no?
You know, he was under disguise, so I don't know. You know, no one knew who he was. I don't remember this being raised. I do remember when we lived, not necessarily related to Eichman, but I do remember when we lived in Europe that we were told, I mean, it was in the 70s where there were a lot of those envelopes that people opened and exploded and things like that. So we were a bit careful at that point. I remember my mom, not my dad, but my mom saying, be careful of this and this. Don't talk about your dad. I remember even going to, at some point for a year, we used to go to school with police behind escorting us because of the situation. And we were Israelis in Europe and all that. But I don't remember, and I don't think he cared really. It was just keep going.
Thank you so much for adding layers of.
So real quick, if you haven't seen the journal, Rob will have it out at a table. You can take another pass by it and take a look at the original. We have coming up this program with Dr. Dawson. That's on March 9th. So mark that in your calendars. And don't forget to go by the gift shop. See if you find something to your liking. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.